What's going on, people? Welcome to another episode of the Mike Roach podcast, brought to you by the one and only OXP Media and the Battle Canada series. Now, people, I got a very, very special guest for you, okay? Rashad Phillips, former pro, all right? And listen, he's an NCAA and basketball, NCAA and NBA prospect specialist and owner of Sports Talk 2319. If you follow basketball heavily, you probably follow him on social already, whether it be on Instagram or Twitter. And listen, man, you got a real following out here on Twitter. People are loving your stuff out here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it. I just try to bring a different perspective when it comes to the game of basketball. And for me, I love teaching what I know and sharing my personal experiences in the game of basketball.
Now, before we even get in, this podcast is going to be a lot about the Toronto Raptors and the Boston Celtics, right? But you played in college and you were very good. And you played in high school, you were really, really good. And a lot of people didn't believe in you and believe in your ability, right? And I see you on Twitter and the things that you say, and it's the reason I follow you is because a lot of the things you say happen to be true when it happens, but it's very different. You have a very different take, right, than a lot of other people. And there are a lot of people who play the game. There are a lot of people who coach the game. And when I see your passion and the way that you speak about the game of basketball, I want to know how that comes about. Because like I said, there's a lot of people who play, there's a lot of people who coach, but I haven't, and I'll be honest, I have not really seen many people break the game down like you can. So I want to know, like, how did your knowledge of the game of basketball come about?
I really appreciate that. I think it started, I think I was born into the game. My father was a huge sports fanatic. I was raised under it, football, basketball, baseball, played all those sports. And just over time, I kind of developed a certain imagination for the game where I would just really love being creative. And over time, I was able to kind of have that type of style in the way that I played as a player. As a player, I looked at myself as a unique style of point guard when I played. So long story short, when I finished playing and started, training tons of kids and just looking at the game from a different lens, I started to use that same creativity that helped me become a good player and apply that to my sports takes. And so I've been, fortunate enough to be around enough basketball, been around enough basketball to be able to gauge the temperature of the sport when the normal person's antennas maybe not register to those certain things. So I try to share that with my following. And sometimes it comes off as, maybe I know something too much than the next person, but for me, it's that I'm sharing something with you guys because my antennas actually can wrap around the curtains, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And now with that being said, I want you to share some of your knowledge with us in Toronto about this series with the Boston Celtics and the Toronto Raptors. Now, these are two teams who sweep their opponents in the first round. They're both coming into the second round now, and you have Gordon Hayward who goes down with an injury. Now you have Kyle Lowry who goes down with an injury. In your perspective at this point, who do you believe has the edge going into this series?
I'm going to give the edge to Toronto Raptors right now. You got to look at the body of work and what they've been able to accomplish throughout the season. And you also have to take into account last season as well. This is a team, obviously they don't have Kawhi, but this is a team that collectively knows how to play together. They're on one accord. They actually love seeing the next person succeed. And anytime you have that type of synergy amongst your locker room, it spills out into the court. And when you see the Raptors play, you see all of those intangibles kind of transpire.
So if we're looking at the team's backcourts, okay, now you have a guy like Fred VanVleet, and now with Lowry out, you're probably going to see a lot more of a Norman Powell. What do you think that matchup is going to be like when they take on the likes of Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum?
I think it's going to be, I think Van Vliet will be matched up against Kemba Walker and Marcus Smart. So I think that will be the matchup as far as the guard tandem. I think you're going to see Van Vliet and Kemba Walker kind of have a duel, and Marcus Smart is going to really kind of try to get under Powell's skin. But when you're playing against the Raptors, you have to understand you're playing against a veteran team. They have been through the ringer. They understand how to play in hostile environments. They're well coached. Not taking anything away from Boston, because I do think that's a formidable team over there, and they also can bring that fight as well. I just tip my hat to Toronto just because this is a team that has done it longer. They've won a championship together, so they kind of understand the moment a little bit more than Boston.
What's your opinion on the Raptors offense? Because to me, that's the one place where they kind of lack at times. Defensively, they're really strong, keeping their defender in front of their man. Their help defense is really good. They're talking a lot, but it seems to me like there's times where they could be stagnant with their scoring, right? So in regards to the Raptors offense, do you see it being a problem at any time, or do you think it'll be okay because of how strong that they are as a defensive collective group?
I mean, when you look at what's going on now in the bubble, obviously it's more offensive minded. It's a little bit more rec ballish than it used to be before the pandemic. So I do have some concerns in regards to their offense and really having that settled go-to scorer. Obviously, Pascal, for me, is one of my favorite players in the NBA and what he brings to the table. He has an unorthodox way of going about scoring his points. But collectively, they still kind of struggle just finding that one guy. And that's what Kawhi gave them last year. Pascal has done a terrific job of filling in that gap. But offensively, I just think they're very unselfish. Sometimes they're too unselfish where they making extra passes. And a lot of times they get a few shot clock violations because they're overly passive. But like you said, defensively, they're so good. They're on one accord that they create offense from a lot of defensive stops. They get a lot of deflections. They get steals. They get one shot and out. So that helps their offense because they get into transition where they're dangerous.
So when you see a guy like OG Anunoby, what is your assessment of his game? Because he's very good defensively, but he's very inconsistent with his scoring. What kind of role do you see him playing in this series?
Well, you're going to need OG's defense when you're looking at Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown and what they bring to the table with the firepower. So when I look at OG, for me, his defense is his strong suit. So he hangs his hat there. That's where his lunch pail is. So his tremendous defense outweighs his offense, and you have to live with that. Now, playing with the Kyle Lowry and a Fred VanVleet, he doesn't have to be a great offensive player. He just has to have himself in position to make plays when they need him. But he's going to be the guy that they use as a defensive stopper to guard, again, Jaylen Brown, Tatum. And even if Kemba Walker gets going, he's so versatile that he can guard multiple positions. So he's kind of that Swiss Army knife on the defensive side of the ball, which is what I really love about his game.
Now, I got to ask you this question because it was either last week or the week before. Your homeboy, Kendrick Perkins, all right, was he had this argument on a few different shows, and that was, I think it was on like The Jump, it was on like First Take, and they had the argument between Pascal Siakam and Jayson Tatum, right? If you had to choose one of these guys, who would you take and why?
I'm going to take Pascal Siakam. I just believe his motor, his unorthodox style of play, his productivity, his efficiency, and the way he goes about the game, it's really hard for him to have bad games the way he plays. When you look at Jayson Tatum, who I'm a huge fan of, his style of play, you can have bad games in that way that it's a little bit more flashy. It's a lot more risk-taking offensive ways he scores, which kind of produces a higher probability of having bad games. Siakam keeps his game in a box, which allows him to not have a lot of drop-off. But when you play a little bit of that risk-taking offensive mindset, the step-back jumpers, a little bit more flash, you kind of increase your probability of not being able to do that every single game. And we watched that with James Harden. I don't want to get off subject, but guys who play the risk-taking offensive type of style of players in the NBA, they tend to have more bad games than the guys like a Pascal, a Kawhi Leonard, guys who keep their game in the box, if that makes sense.
No, 100% it makes sense. I understand that. Now, let me ask you this, because we see a lot of coaches in the NBA. You guys have guys now like Brad Stevens and Nick Nurse, who may at times run some different schemes than other coaches. What I want to know before I even get into these two guys, what do you think about NBA coaching? Because I don't want to sound like a jerk, but I feel like because of some of the things that have transpired over the last few years when it comes to coaching, when it comes to general managers, I think a lot of it can be overrated. I think a lot of these coaches, they're saying a lot of these coaches and general managers, a lot of these scouts that we have in the NBA, I think they're given a little bit too much credit. I don't believe they're as good as we believe that they are. I'm not saying all of them aren't good, but there's certain teams that, like the Raptors, the Spurs, and a few other teams that usually hit the nail on the head when it comes to drafting players, and over and over and over again. And then we're seeing certain teams that they continually draft bad. They don't make a lot of moves. They don't get into the playoffs year after year after year. I think a lot of these coaches and a lot of these scouts and GMs are really overrated. But what's your opinion on that?
I do think that there's a lot of people, in the industry that really don't have a certain criteria that they follow in order to be successful. In order to be successful in anything, you have to have some type of template to follow. And when you look at the Toronto Raptors, the San Antonio Spurs, teams that draft well, they have a template. Golden State, they have a template, and they follow this template, and they continue the success. The teams that struggle are teams that do not have the right management in place. There's too many hands in the kitchen type thing. It's a power ego trip in the offices, and that's what we're witnessing when you see some of these draft picks and some of these teams that can't get over the hump. The management has yet to figure out a template that they should follow so they can maintain success. That's why the Raptors is going to be a terrific team for the next 10 years. That's why the San Antonio Spurs has had so much success over the years, because their ability to draft, develop, and put the right people in play and trust the voices up top to allow them to do that. So you gotta have a blueprint, a template.
Okay. I just got a couple more for you. Okay. Now, like I said, you're looking at guys like Brad Stevens and Nick Nurse. Now, in the NBA, you find a lot of the same schematics when it comes to offensive and defensive plays.
Yeah.
But in your opinion, why do coaches not try more schematics? And by that, I mean, try different zones,
Yeah.
forecourt press, half-court traps.
Yeah.
To me, I find, especially when you've played AAU ball or you've played at any type of high level, if you don't run these, if you don't run them properly, you can get crushed and it can dismantle your defense, and you can get easy baskets if the offensive team knows what they're doing. I would assume it's because they can get picked apart easily if they're not played to perfection. But what is your opinion on why coaches don't try more things in the NBA?
Well, you basically answered your own question. The NBA players are too good. You can't gimmick professionals. You can't run 2-1-2 presses, and because the players are too good, they're too aware. So it's like playing a video game and the sliders are all the way up on the intelligence. So you can't outthink a professional that knows what they're doing. So a lot of times these coaches are just going to stick to the basic fundamentals, man to man, a little trap here. If it's a ball screen, we're going to trap it, or we're going to drop coverage it. We're going to get under. We're going to jam and get over. We're going to jam and get under. They're usually going to just stick with the basic principles and allow the professional to make the read instead of trying to over coach and overreact. So again, to answer your question, that's why you don't see a lot of NBA coaches trying to do that. Now, we did see the Raptors. Your Raptors threw a boxing 1, a boxing 2 on the Golden State Warriors, but that's because it was warranted, because Steph Curry is the most dangerous human being in the NBA when he's playing and healthy. So obviously it required that. But night in, night out, it'll take too much away from the players. So it's better to just let the principles take shape itself.
All right, Rashad, last question here. If you had to pick an X factor for each team, who would it be?
I'm going to go, my X factor for the Celtics would be Robert Williams.
Wow, okay.
I really like this kid. I mean, I scouted him out of Texas A&M. He has a tremendous motor. He had a few good games in the bubble so far. He's a hybrid, can rebound. He's a rim protector. So I really like what he brings. I don't know if Coach Stevens is going to trust him in this type of atmosphere right now with so much on the line. But I really like Robert Williams as the X factor for the Boston Celtics. Now, for the Toronto Raptors, my X factor will be Terrence Davis. He's such a tremendous player. He plays with a chip on his shoulder. Another kid that I scouted out of Ole Miss. He could do a little bit of everything. He can shoot it a little bit. He can handle a little bit. He can initiate offense a little bit. He's a great athlete. He can defend. So I believe Nick Nurse is going to, dig into his bench and look to give Terrence Davis some major minutes because he's proven.
Rashad, I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to do this. So Rashad Phillips, Sports Talk 2319. I'm going to leave some links at the bottom so everybody can go check you out. And where can we find you on social media?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter, RP3Natural, and I'm on Instagram, Rashad Phillips 2319.
All right, really appreciate that. And I'm looking to see what you're going to be writing on social about all these series going on. So appreciate you having you on, and looking forward to speaking to you again soon, brother.
Thank you. Talk soon.
Thank you.